there's something that I've been working for, the 6 months, 7 months now of $1,000 a week, $1,000 a week, $1,000 a week. Everything you're doing now, it's $1,000 a week. You're working for that. So, I have it in my mind. I've been fighting for this day. I'm ready for my check at the end of the week on Friday. It's going to have $1,000 in it. So we get to the assistant management meeting where they're going over all the fine details of this promotion that I'm getting. And basically it's like, well, it's not actually $1,000 a week. You still have to go, and what you're going to do is you're going to work all day in the office. By the way, you're not really getting paid for that. Okay, but what you're telling me is I'm going to work from 9 to 5 in the office, go out for 2 hours at the end of the day and try to make as much money as possible to pay my bills.
All right, Austin, you were an assistant manager for a Cydcor office. You were doing you started doing the door-to-door Star Energy campaign, so door-to-door selling green energy. You were based out of Cincinnati, and you were hired by a guy named Ben. How do you pronounce his last name? Is it Gouwens?
Gouwens, yeah.
Gouwens, okay, Ben Gouwens. The office was called Kirkwood in Cincinnati. Like I said, you made it to assistant manager. But one of the things you talked about was when you were going door to door, you were supposed to have some type of like permit, right? Like you had to pay a fee and kind of let them know, let the townships, county know that you were going to be there. And you said you were told that you had one, but you said that was not the case, correct? You found out.
Yeah. So when you first start, you're kind of relying on your leaders in general with getting the information across. So I know when I was first starting in the business as an associate, the sales people on the ground, we get told, yeah, don't worry, we're allowed to be here, because you'll have people say, I'm going to call the cops on you. You're not allowed to be here. It says no soliciting. And, our response was basically, no, we've got a permit. They know we're here. And basically once me and the other assistant manager that we started taking over and learning things, basically it was go wherever you can. If the cops get called, relocate. We got permits only when absolutely necessary, if we thought it was worth the payout. But most of the time you're looking at $10 to $50 per person per day for some of the permits, and every single township area is going to be different, but it's required in pretty much anywhere that I experienced that you're supposed to have a permit through the local authority to let them know that you're in the area and allowed to be there, and just make sure that people know you're not someone going around trying to scam people, because outside of the business, that's a pretty common tactic for someone to go around acting like a salesperson to scope out houses to steal from.
Right. Now, the office you worked for, Kirkwood, out of Cincinnati, Ben Gouwens was the owner. You said that was basically a brand new office when you got hired on. Ben, I guess he moved from Pittsburgh. Actually did some research on Ben. I was stunned to find out he grew up about 10 minutes max from where I grew up. He's a Northwest Indiana guy. He's a region rat, just like me. But anyway, so you said this was a new office. So like, what were kind of take me through that dynamic. What were some of the things, since you were new, Ben was kind of new, the office was kind of new. What was like the atmosphere and the environment like?
See, so Ben wasn't new per se. So Ben had opened this office in Cincinnati and it had failed. The person that he had opened it up with and hired out, Diego, he ended up leaving later on. But what had happened was the office collapsed and he needed to come back to reopen the office basically. And he completely restarted it. When he came down, it was him and his admin, Gina. And I believe there were 6 other leaders, maybe 5, that they brought with them. And they reopened. And I was, if I recall correctly, I was the first person actually hired into that office when it got started. So they had a really crummy office space on the east side of town, and they ran their interviews out of the one, and we had our daily warm-ups and everything in the other conference room. And so that was kind of the start of everything, is those 5 leaders going out and doing a lot of double interviews from what I remember. But for me, I had a bit of a different experience than I think most people that I had experienced before, and then what I've heard from other offices and other people's experience. Ben took me out on my training. Or interview, excuse me. Took me out on the interview for my first round interview. Took me out for the second round where we went and actually did the door-to-door aspect of it. And then he's the one that hired me, and he was technically my leader throughout the entire thing as an owner. So I do know that was slightly different from how other people's experience go.
Right. Now, you said over time you really caught on. You and another leader that kind of came in right with you were kind of the stars of your office.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that in addition, like you just said, you were the first one hired on new. Ben did bring a group of people with him from Pittsburgh, but you said that you found out that they all live together, and anyone
Mm-hmm.
who has seen any of our other videos knows this is becoming an incredibly common theme. These people all live together, and you also said that he was dating the admin. His girlfriend was the admin.
They're married now. Yeah.
They're married now. Okay.
They're married now. Yeah.
Congratulations, Ben. You're married now, for what it's worth. But then you said after you and this other leader really became the stars of the office, everybody kind of left and they moved out. So I'm curious,
Mm-hmm.
how did you first find out that they were all living together, and did that seem kind of strange to you, or like what was kind of your reaction to that?
So when I first started, being the first new person in the office, everybody had relationships already. Mm-hmm. So I think I justified it in my mind of, well, they all moved from Pittsburgh. So for the short time while, they're getting on their feet, so they all come together, they're getting set up. It made sense to me why let's just get a place together. It'll keep things cost efficient for us to do the move. So I justified it in that way. Looking back now, it was absolutely strange for someone's boss to be asking for rent every month, and then also being able to explain like the people that are struggling to pay rent to your boss, and your boss is the one that's not helping you pay for your rent very well. Is a very strange concept to me. But yeah, the way I found out that they were actually living together is I believe we had a team event, and the 5 of them that were not the owner and the admin all came in the same car and left in the same car back to the same place. And I just kind of questioned that. But again, you kind of justify things. You're in this circular, insular group, and there's no way to get that outside influence.
It amazes me, because when I went through the field and my time in the business, like I never heard of that. It was something that I didn't realize, and I didn't even realize it once I started doing these videos, until more and more people started saying it. And it's like, that is really strange. But I mean, yeah, it made sense to justify it, right? Because if you're bringing a group of people over, they're not going to be able to buy, their own place for 5 different places. So it makes sense. But you're a lot of things in these operations you're able to kind of justify, even though they, like you said, looking back, they really.
Yeah, well, I think it's the small things too, because it's not that any one thing on its own doesn't make sense, but as a big picture, like you start adding up, like, well, you live with your boss, well, your admin's dating the boss, and it's all these little domino effects of things where on their own they're innocuous enough, but you add them up and then look at the big picture, and it's a strange thing to view when you have that kind of retrospect look at what you did and what you experienced, and it changes everything, your viewpoint on it in every way.
Now, you were things are going really well for you. It sounds like you were making the apps, you were making some money. You ended up going to a leadership conference down in Texas, and you met some big names. I found out in Cydcor circles. You met a person named Ken Lear, who is pictured on the Devil Corp website, and you also met a person named Shaine Thurman. I'm curious, how are these people introduced to you? Like, were these like the people that if you touched, your wounds would be healed? Like, how were they built up to you?
Yeah, no, that's definitely. I think the original way that it's kind of presented as like these are mentors. So Ben is the person that was hired out under Shaine, hired out under Ken. So there's this hierarchy of like people that are awesome at everything they do. And, the stories that they'll tell of their actions and how they got to where they are the stories that you're supposed to believe that are possible for everyone to be able to attain. So that's kind of the first thing is like, look, I know you're just getting into this business. I know you see how you're at right now. You could be a Ken Lear, the guy that has his custom suits and you go and you see him at the events like that. And, he's a really well put together guy. He's got charisma. He's got this stature and status of someone that can, make things change. And that's something they build that up in your head and present it to you. And then, the leadership conference, especially, that's their point in time to really make sure that you believe and buy into that idea.
Yeah. And I think that's really the whole point of a leadership conference is, you have this opportunity to meet these multimillionaires, these people that are so successful. And I was doing some research on Shaine Thurman, and I don't know if you've seen this, but if you Google Shaine's name, even without Cydcor, but you Google his name, there's this video. I don't know if you've seen the video, but it's like a celebration of Shaine.
That's fairly recent. It's in the last year or so, right? Yeah. No, I know because he had at one point in time lost all his leaders as an owner, or excuse me, as whatever the next step up from owner is, super owners. But he had lost all his owners and basically gone back to being a assistant manager in a way, and now he's back up into the status again. Mm-hmm. So I did see that's on the site, and I think Gary Paulson and a few others are up there as well.
Oh yeah, they're all Gary Paulson's in there. All the yeah, Ken Lear's in that video.
Please help me welcome to the stage organizational consultant Shaine Thurman.
He really wanted to do something in his life. He's willing to learn, has a great student mentality. He get knocked down, and he gets back up.
He's been such a student of the game, where he's learned a lot about himself. I think he's so gritty.
He wants everybody to do their best and reach their potential.
He doesn't give up. I think he's one of those leaders that I think he leads by example.
He is the definition of tenacious.
He's got a ton of potential to really just continue to build his organization. I'm really excited for him.
We're all proud of Shaine. Just has great determination to be a better person.
But yeah, if you want to see a video of a who's who of Cydcor royalty and just the fawning over this guy. I mean, the only thing that was missing was the lotions and the oils and the women feeding him cakes. It's just this fanfare video for Shaine Thurman. I almost feel weird saying his name right now. I feel like I need to do some kind of some holy gesture because I'm mentioning his name here. But I digress. So as I'm going through your message, I'm just kind of going through my head how long you were there. How long were you totally with Cydcor?
Officially under Kirkwood with Ben. I think it was right at 10 months. And then, like I said, my message, me and the other assistant manager, I ended up going and working in his office for a few months at the very end. Yeah. He was not officially with Cydcor at that point in time. They basically broke ties with him, and he was working for the supplier directly that I believe it was Direct Energy. So same exact system, but not officially through Cydcor at that point.
And you were eventually promoted to assistant manager. So you essentially you made it to where everybody or most people who enter these scams want to get to. You had
Absolutely.
your big climb. But then you said in your message that your friend, the other leader, was promoted in May. And then you were next. Like you were supposed to be promoted in early July, but then you said, this is where things started to get really suspicious to me. You were on a business trip when you were getting promoted. So what was suspicious to you? Because you had, and using your words, are also you drank the Kool-Aid, quote unquote, to an extent that you were still there. You were right on the cusp of assistant management. So what was suspicious now all of a sudden?
So as we're getting to the point where, I've got a pretty decent team around me. I've got people that, you know, I can trust that are working hard, and, you know, we've kind of got that team bond going on. They were all rooting for me to get assistant manager. It was one of those where within our office we had the two teams. We had my team and the other assistant manager team, and the management definitely played that up. Like, you know, Randy already made assistant manager. It's your turn. You better fight for it and prove that you can do it. So, we had our first week where we were qualified for the assistant manager position. And we decided it was going to be the best decision for me to take the majority of our team and go on a road trip, because typically it's easier to get apps out to somewhere where they haven't heard of Star Energy, and, you know, get out of Cincinnati where everybody's heard of everything. And so we took the trip, and I believe it was literally like the golden hour kind of thing. You know, the last minute couldn't possibly be any later. We got the app that sealed the deal, and, you know, our whole team's really excited. We end up coming back, and the next morning is like the celebration of you made assistant management. So we do the morning meeting where everybody comes in, and we worked in an office with a direct TV office that worked out of, I believe, Walmart's. So like, they pulled all of their guys in. It was all our guys. There were probably 40 people in a 20 by 20 room. And, you know, it was really cool experience. They got all those guys out, and they ended up having Ken Lear come into the office. So Ken's based out of Cincinnati, Chicago. They flew him in. He's in Cincinnati, talking me through how assistant management pay and everything works. And, you know, there's something that I've been working for, you know, the 6 months, 7 months now, of $1,000 a week, $1,000 a week, $1,000 a week. Everything you're doing now, it's $1,000 a week. You're working for that. So, you know, I have it in my mind. I've been fighting for this day. I'm ready for my check at the end of the week on Friday. It's going to have $1,000 in it. So we get to the assistant management meeting where they're going over all the fine details of this promotion that I'm getting. And basically it's like, well, it's not actually $1,000 a week. You still have to go, and what you're going to do is you're going to work all day in the office. By the way, you're not really getting paid for that. But all the apps you make, you're going to make full value of those. So instead of making $35, you're making $80. It's like, okay, but what you're telling me is I'm going to work from 9 to 5 in the office, go out for 2 hours at the end of the day, and try to make as much money as possible to pay my bills. And, you know, they spun it, and at this point, it's the sunk cost fallacy. I've spent 6 months working my ass off. I'm going to fight for this. And so it was like, okay, let's see what's going to happen here. I put too much time in this to quit today. Let's just see how it works out. You know, the guy I was working with, he got assistant management. He's working well. It's not hurting him too much. Maybe I'm overreacting to this. So, you know, not very excited about it, but the entire thing started looking more and more suspicious to me. It wasn't as cut and dry as it seemed, you know, the day before.
So I'm curious, you mentioned the sunk cost fallacy, which I think most everybody who even thinks about leaving has that go through their mind. And so I know it did me for quite a while. Did you, when you sat down with Ken Lear and you learned all this stuff about, well, this whole thing we've been telling you this whole time, we were actually lying to you. That's not how it's going to work. This is how it's going to work. Did you talk to anybody? Like, did you talk to anyone in your support system, any friends, anyone else in the business who you're kind of like, you know, I'm at the point where I'm being lied to, and I know I'm being lied to.
Yeah, and Stan, I think this was absolutely the reason they were trying to rush their assistant manager out, because now there's two of us that have just been told the same thing at the same time, roughly, and we're able to ask questions, because he's my best friend in the business. You know, he was basically the one that trained me, and we've spent 6 months fighting for the same thing. And now we're starting to ask questions to each other. Like, did that make sense to you? Was that really how you understood it? And, you know, again, we've been telling people for the last 6 months, you make assistant manager, you're getting $1,000 a week. Yeah. So I started asking those sorts of questions, and Randy is having the same questions I am on what's going on with that. So yeah, that was where having someone else that's in the same position as me be able to ask those questions was game changer. I probably would not have been out of the business as quick as I was without having him to be able to ask those questions. Because as other people have said, it's hard getting outside of that network. You're in an insular group. So yeah, it was definitely important to me getting out.
Yeah, and I think that's a major reason why these places do try to isolate you from anybody, even first dayers. You know, I know when I was a leader, they told us, if you have new people starting, don't let them congregate, don't let them compare notes or talk to each other, because things like that are going to come out. They're going to talk about, this is really weird, right? Well, this seems kind of off. You know, they're going to talk. And anytime questions come up, anytime people compare notes, the business doesn't like that. And you mentioned too that Ken Lear and a couple other people were actively, it got to a point where they were actively trying to keep you and the other leader apart, right? Would you tell us some of the things they did?
Yeah. So when I started having doubts and questions about what was going on, it became an instant us versus them thing when they found out that Randy and I were asking the same questions. Because I think how it had come up was, I would say, well, I heard from him that this is what's going on, and I literally was in the field one day training one of my new guys, and he said, step away from your new guy right now. Have them go do a couple doors on their own. Okay. And I walked away from him, and he said, I just heard that you're talking to him a lot. Just so you know, he's not going to make it. He's not one of the people that's going to really make it in this company. And, I know you're really close with him, but I think it's time for you to really step out and, make this on your own, because if you associate with the wrong people, you're not going to get very far in this business. And, to him, I think it sounded good. It's like, okay, look, I'm trying to help you, but I'm already suspicious, and it was just adding on to that constant nag in the back of your head of like, what is going on here? And then same thing happened with Ken. Ken would call me fairly often, and it was always that idea of like, what's working for him is temporary. He's doing well right now, but you got to focus on you. You got to quit asking questions to him and focus on listening to the people that are in the business and doing well. So it was definitely consistent. Once we started asking those questions, break us apart as much as possible. And at some point, I can't remember exactly where they had us go, but they had me go to Chicago, I believe, without him, and basically spend a weekend with Shaine and Ken and Ben to just, the indoctrination session of, we got to keep them in our sights and keep them on task.
This other owner, or this other assistant manager, you said that Ken himself said he wasn't long for the business, essentially, but then the other assistant manager, you said, started questioning things. And this was after Ben started kind of showing him how to do things. And according to you, he saw that Ben was taking money from his employees. And this is something that other people that we've interviewed have long suspected, people that are on the app side. And because when you have to fill out the apps, but you don't get paid until everything's connected. If something gets canceled, you don't get paid. And apparently he found out that Ben was telling his people that apps were being rejected, but in fact they weren't, and that Ben himself was keeping the money.
Yeah, and that's something I can't speak to myself. I didn't see it, but I do believe him. But yeah, basically on the energy apps, they have what's called callbacks. So I forget if it's 2 weeks or a month. A customer has a certain amount of time where they can go back calling and cancel whatever they've agreed to. And if that happened, you would get your normal paycheck, but there's basically a line that says clawback due to cancellation. And, you expect, customers are going to look at the fine print and say, hey, I didn't really want to do that. So everyone had them fairly commonly, but what he found was that it was not something that was accurate to what was being told to the employees, that there were extra clawbacks that were not tied to a cancellation. It was something that was fabricated on the company's end.
You had mentioned before about how they were trying to kind of rush out this other assistant manager, and he ended up having to get rid of a lot of his guys too, because they were essentially committing fraud. Apparently, you said they were stealing it or using account numbers and calling in apps without customer approval. We've heard other people talk about that as well. But then the final straw eventually came, right? When you, I think you said that you were being asked to go somewhere else, right? So how did your ending play out?
Basically, a lot of my team had ended up leaving, and they were basically to the point where we can't sustain ourselves here in Cincinnati anymore. At this point, there's a long road of different things that were slight inconveniences and problems, but it was basically, we're going back to Chicago, and I don't think you're going to be able to make it as an owner. We're not prepared to send you out at all. And it was the final straw of saying, I'm not going to keep doing these things that are detrimental to my life. My wife will tell you that I was a horrible human being for the last 3 or 4 months, especially, just because there's so much stress and things going on. And basically, it came to a head where I am going to go to the other assistant manager, where his new branch is. He's an owner now. He opened up in Columbus, and I said, I'm going to work out of Columbus and work with him because, despite differences that him and I may have, I believe that he's doing things honestly. And, we had always talked about, the business has a lot of problems, but we can fix it. We can be the different people. We'll tell people what it's like up front. And, if you're willing to work hard, you can make it. But, I basically sat down with Ben and said, I'm leaving. I'm not willing to do this anymore. And that day I ended up packing up and worked out of Columbus for the final 2 months before I was finally completely out of the system.
And toward the end of your message, you kind of summarized a few other things that you saw. Just to paint a picture, because it really amazes me how much crap people who work in these operations are willing to put up with and really don't question it. I think that's probably why Cydcor and Smart Circle and Credico have to do so much just blatant indoctrination and lying and brainwashing to try to normalize certain things. Because if everybody that applied for one of these positions had all of the information available about them, the reality of what was going to happen, cutting through all the BS that these places indoctrinate with you, I'd say out of every 100 people that applies now, they might get maybe 2. And that's why they can't be honest. And
I think you're being generous.
Yeah, maybe generous.
Yeah, I think you're generous there, but
you said that you had seen dog bites, because you were doing door-to-door. You had seen dog bites. You had heard of sexual assaults, including one of your individuals, people on your team, getting grabbed and almost dragged into a house, having a gun pulled on you, had your brother sleeping on a shelf above your pantry, and a still working stripper / teammate living with you. I mean, that sounds like the basis of I don't know if it would be a sitcom. I don't know if it would be like a dramatic show that you'd see on network TV. But looking back on that now, like how do you feel about that, and how were you able to normalize those things?
Like looking back again, it's one of those where I look back and it was an absolute horror show. Would I ever do it again? Never. And part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is just because, it's not just for what I went through, but, I was complicit with, these things too. I was the leader that let these things happen to people that I genuinely cared about, whether or not they believe that or not. But yeah, a dog bite is something that on its own, sure, not a bad thing. But when this is not an abnormal occurrence, like these were things that we dealt with often. And, again, it's when you're in that, there's the justification of all of it. Every time something happens, there's this immediate need for damage control. And so, when the one girl was sexually assaulted, it was the owner immediately is like, oh, I better call Ken and figure out how we should deal with this so that the business is okay. It's not really about the person. It's just damage control. Make sure that she feels okay. She's not going to call the cops or anything. Let's control it. So, and that's the thing where it gets to a point where, am I willing to be a part of this anymore? And that, there's just so many lies and deception and just lack of empathy that it finally came to that head where I need to leave.
Well, I'm glad you were able to get out, even though it was, a large amount of time that was dedicated to this. I know you had mentioned, and through my research, I've confirmed that your owner, Ben Gouwens, he's no longer with Kirkwood. He's now with KBD Edge out of Chicago. And his wife, Gina, is still doing what she does, HR and recruiting. So I'm assuming these people are going to be lifers.
Mm-hmm.
Have you kept in touch with anybody from your days in this operation?
The other assistant manager and I still talk infrequently, and then two of the people that I actually had hired on with me ended up working together in future careers unrelated to this. But so we were work associates there as well, and we get along fairly well, but unrelated to the Cydcor model at all.
Right.
So we did keep in touch and work together for pretty sure 2 or 3 years, if I remember. The one other thing that I think is important just for people to realize is the amount of deception that goes into the advertising of the positions. So that's something that I am pretty passionate about, staying on top of the KBD Edge, as you said now. There's a lot of shady things going on there that I don't even know if I understand the full scope of, but after Ben and Gina left Cincinnati and renamed the company, they also dispose of their old company page, even though their site still says Kirkwood. It doesn't say KBD Edge. I don't recall if it does now, but so they try to get away from the Glassdoor reviews of all the people that had negative impacts on them, and that's something that I tried to avoid. So I got their Glassdoor pages merged because due to the terms of service on there, they work as the same entity, and those reviews are for the same company. So I think that's something that people aren't going to be able to see, because as soon as a company switches that page, all that's gone. And then something I was actually going through on the legal side of things, I know that from what I've heard from other people that have been owners is, they're signing their ability over to Cydcor for ownership on a lot of these things. I looked into the W-2s I had from Kirkwood. It's based in a house in Georgia, which they don't live in Georgia. They never have, as far as I know. So I don't know how that comes into play either, but I think it's just an interesting tidbit that I found literally today. I was looking through all my stuff I had on Kirkwood, and they're operating out of a home, residential building in Georgia. So I'm not sure what the importance is there, but I think it's something that is
a little shady.
Yeah,
a little shady. You'd think that an actual legitimate company would operate out of its given address where you go every day and every morning. But there's nothing legitimate about any of this. And Smart Circle and Cydcor, they can put out as many videos as they want, trying to rationalize and try to put it in such a way, in such language that, oh, this is how you run a business. And they can create these fawning video tributes and have titles of people like national consultant and CEO, but it's a giant ruse. It's designed to manipulate, it's designed to deceive, it's designed to trap, and it's designed to take as much from you as possible, whether that's your time, whether that's your freedom, whether that's your money. These are all things that these companies promise you. Once you climb that mountain to assistant manager and then manager, they say, oh, this will all be yours, but in fact, they're stealing it from you. I mean, it's the closest thing to a scam, to a mind control cult that you can imagine, and they all operate the same way. And I really wish we could get to a point, because we could call these companies what they are: Smart Circle, Cydcor, Credico, Appco, whatever. But all of the little names, if no one's ever heard of these companies before, no, Kirkwood, KBD Edge, other companies we've mentioned in other interviews, they try to disassociate themselves from these these pyramid scams, these cults, but they're literally just like a McDonald's franchise. That's literally all it is.
Well, and see, the one of the biggest problems, like with all of that, is yes, they're very deceptive, but like the promises that they're selling are not accurate anyway. So like I would consider myself within the business a fairly successful person. I was on high roller calls for our group and everything. I made a total in the 10 months I was there. I made $30,000. I was an assistant manager. I was doing better than all of the other people, bar maybe the assistant manager that was with me. And I'm making 30 grand. That is deceptive to its core, because I remember being told you're going to make upwards of $300-500 a week minimum.
Yeah.
Some people make $1,300 a week. That's not accurate. There is no person that's making the money that they're claiming anyway. Go to McDonald's. You'll make just as much. You'll have benefits.
Yep. And you can work your way up through an actual company. One that is actually reputable. I mean, I wouldn't eat McDonald's every day, but at least they're a more respectable business than any of this crap we're talking about.
It's absolutely abysmal that you can call McDonald's a better business than you are. And I think it speaks volumes that that's a true statement.